My guest today is Dr. Robert Malone, a doctor, scientist, inventor, and Virginian farmer. We discuss the organizations and people behind the creation of the World Economic Forum, the war against farmers, and the potential fall guys for the COVID-19 pandemic. This is another conversation with one of my favorite people in the world today. Stay tuned. Dr. Malone, we meet again. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm great. I'm great now that I'm talking to you, man. I told you before we did this, and I'm glad I'm getting another swing at this because I felt like I was not at the intellectual level I should have been for our first conversation.
And
So,
saying that embarrasses me. Remember I was a carpenter and a farmhand before I was a physician and a scientist.
right.
And we still run our farm today. And by the way, it's a nasty, wet, cold, muddy day. I still have to get the hay and plow the fields and fix the tractor and everything else. So I'm I'm flattered by your comments, but please just drop it and let's just be normal people. Okay.
Okay, deal. Actually, you know what? You brought up a very what I wanted to lead with. You're a doctor and a scientist and inventor, but you're also a farmer, and there seems to be a global war on farmers right now. And we're seeing protests in Germany.
Yeah.
We saw protests in the Netherlands. I don't think
Which
Canada's
were
going to.
successful, right?
Yes, that's right. And I don't think Canada is going to be very far behind. I think the farmers out here are getting very restless. Is this an issue you're familiar with?
Yeah. So Ava Vandenbroek, or whatever her last name is, this amazingly attractive and well-spoken blonde woman who's been standing in the barricades with the farmers all the way through this, is a friend. We've spent social time together, and I really respect what she's been doing, and I follow that thread closely. It's as you say, near and dear to my heart, as is the various moves here in the States. I don't know so much about the Canadian farmer situation. I was integrated to a significant extent. I don't want to take credit for anything, but in supporting the Canadian truckers, and I still have my Freedom Riders jacket from the horsemen that supported them, and one of my most popular Substack essays is the letter to the Canadian truckers that I posted, and I recorded various videos and podcasts in support of them when that was all happening, and what a tragedy and how that was terminated. Still unclear to me who those troops were, and I think unclear to many where those troops came from. Apparently they weren't Canadians, and who brought them in and from where, and all that seems to remain a mystery. If the Canadian, are you based in Alberta? I got to ask.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm in the
Yeah.
Calgary area.
So I just did an hour and a half or 2 hours with the Citizens Inquiry Group yesterday. So they're telling me that there's a growing awareness by, let's say, the persuadable middle in Alberta, at least, that they've been had. I don't know how else to say it. And they're not very happy about it. And whereas previously people that were completely resistant to an alternative narrative have increasingly opened up, let's say, to the message that they weren't told the truth about a whole lot of things, not the least of which is the regulatory status of the quote vaccine products and all the lockdown policies and everything else. And that if that's true, if you can verify that, that's really good news.
Oh,
You know,
yeah, it's the atmosphere here in Alberta is one that is sharply swinging toward independence. And our premier here in Alberta is Danielle Smith, and
yeah.
she's part of the United Conservative Party, but I politically I would consider her more of a libertarian than anything. And Danielle Smith is a direct response in terms of her being voted premier. It's a direct response to Justin Trudeau and the death cult that currently runs our country.
Death cult, appropriately so named because of the state-assisted suicide bills and advocacy, which is now becoming a significant cause of death, as I understand it, in Canada.
Yeah,
The
sorry, please go ahead.
much of the world is shocked to see what's going there, because what we've seen is that these, I'll just say it, World Economic Forum affiliated politicians seem to be piloting policies within Canada that they then attempt to deploy in other nation states. So we look at Canada these days increasingly as a weather vane, I guess would be a metaphor for how the wind may be blowing soon in other regions, including here in the US. I mean, I'm having a growing number of voices that are quite experienced in American politics and, have served in the White House, et cetera, asserting that they've come to the conclusion that Mr. Biden is compromised by the CCP. For however, is it financial? Is it blackmail? I mean, we've had these reveals about Epstein and all of that. Who knows what might be the driver there, but that it's extremely difficult to square the circle of Biden's executive actions that seem so contrary to American interests and so consistent with CCP interests as anything other, as a coincidence. Let's say it's very difficult, increasingly difficult, to attribute the actions to pure coincidence.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, in Canada, so I spoke to Sam Cooper. He's an investigative journalist here in Canada, and he's been digging into the foreign influence story. And the more he digs, it becomes increasingly evident that the CCP is not. I wouldn't even say just influencing. I would say installing
Yeah,
members of our government. And
and integrated.
yeah,
I just learned yesterday that half of the employees at the NIH are Chinese nationals.
how does that, as a doctor, right? I mean, to see for somebody like me on the outside, I hear that and it's appalling. But for a doctor, for somebody who understands the inner workings of medicine, I mean, what is that? What do you like? How do you feel about that?
Uh, Alarmed, disgusted. Uh, One of the things it's become normalized that the Chinese nationals are a quote good value, and they work. It's much like the same logic. I don't know if you saw the little clip from The View. Probably not.
I did.
Okay, with the blue hair and who's going to clean Donald Trump's toilets?
Yeah.
Just a stunning statement. But in cutting edge medical research, these folks are long known to put their head down, do what they're told, and they will. There's a long history of folks, coming out of the Chinese educational system, which, by the way, their MD has little to do with our MDs, but it's granted the same, and so they're given the same status. Likewise, PhD. But they will generate the data that's necessary to support the hypothesis. If you follow what I'm saying.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're if you're a principal investigator at NIH or otherwise, and you're funded to do certain things and prove certain things, then these are the perfect worker bees. They'll do what they're told, they'll work diligently, and they'll do their best to produce the data that you need. The one of, as we trace back through the corrupting influences that have pervaded modern medicine, of course, everybody likes to beat up on pharma, and for good reason. But there are also perverse incentives built within the federal funding streams. And the short version is, if a given institute pays you to work on a given problem, if you produce data that contradicts the accepted narrative, then you will not get more funding. You're basically, when you sign up for those grants and contracts, you're expected to deliver the content that the government is seeking, not the truth. It's not about the truth, it's about the narrative. And once you go down that hole, then suddenly everything becomes relative. When it's all about increasing power and funding and full-time employees and square footage and your list of toys, then the data and the truth become victims and secondary. And this is one of the corrupting influences that's happened that no one acknowledges, but they're built in these structural incentives. So getting back to the Chinese nationals, they work for peanuts, almost literally, and in part that there is it's long been known. They call it the NIH shunt, that if you can spend your 3, 4, 5 years in NIH as a postdoc, then you're able to get high status positions in academia. Or if you return back to China, in Chinese academia. So you have this emprunteur. It's like the benefits that used to flow from going to one of the Ivy League schools. You're branded as among the elite, and that yields all kinds of upsides. You then have a network of contacts within the federal government, within the NIH structure, and you can tap into those to get foreshadowing about new funding initiatives, to get preferential review, et cetera. Basically, it sets you up as of the chosen for the rest of your career, unless you do something like I did and buck the system,
Right.
or state inconvenient truths, or just blindly try to follow the truth. That's not what's needed. But if you've come through the CCP system, you know darn well that it's all about supporting the approved narrative. And what is also abundantly clear is all these people that are within U.S. academe or Canadian academe or medical research in the government are to think of them as not being agents of the CCP is to be grossly naive. They're all carefully tracked, and they are aware that they need to toe the straight and narrow with the homeland, and so they're not, even if they get green cards or even eventually U.S. citizenship, they're serving a foreign master. They don't have any choice, especially if they still have family back in China. And if they transgress, there will be consequences. So they're it's a very different ethical framework from the classical liberal in the Jeffersonian sense, frame of reference that we all think of ourselves as living under, or historically thought of ourselves as living under, in these, let's call them democracies with roots in Great Britain, right? In the
Yeah,
British system.
that's right.
We all thought that this was all about classical liberalism and freedoms and liberties, and we're racing towards a, as you know, a centralized world government that uses is largely driven and managed by large corporations, corporatism, because the thesis that large corporations are better suited to manage global resources and economics and all that kind of stuff. Excuse me, I'm going to cough.
Yeah, me too, actually.
Yeah. So that's and these globalist organizations invariably they have deep ties to the CCP.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've been thinking quite a bit about this lately because as time goes on, the World Economic Forum begins to feel more and more like a cartoon organization. And by that I mean
we would say cutout.
that's right, a cutout. And Klaus Schwab he just feels like he's been hand selected to be the evil villain in this story, and I'm not disputing that he has
The WEF was created by the CIA with Henry Kissinger. That's irrefutable.
Can you explain that?
If you go back to the history of the founding of the WEF, and meetings at Harvard, I think it's either Harvard or Yale. So I've documented that in prior Substacks. And Klaus Schwab was specifically mentored by Henry Kissinger. So if you go back, it's in my Substacks, but it's easy to search with various browsers, assuming that you're able to get access to this information from Canada, which is a question. If you search on Klaus Schwab, Henry Kissinger, and the WEF, you'll pull up a series of links that explicitly document the founding of the World Economic Forum. I think it was in the 60s, coming out of a series of meetings, and Klaus having been mentored by Kissinger, and there's actually a video, a WEF video, one of their little conferences that they do, in which they're interviewing Klaus Schwab concerning his ties to Henry Kissinger, and he brags about it. He acts all coy. Oh, as kind of bashful. Oh, well, I did have this relationship, whatever it is he says. So it's pretty open and transparent. The WEF absolutely was created by CIA with Henry Kissinger's deep involvement. Klaus was put in that position. And then there's the Ancillary Club of Rome and other organizations that have fed into this. But our analysis, it's in our book, The Lies My Government Told Me, in our introduction to the World Economic Forum. My thesis is the WEF is functionally a trade organization. So it's a trade union of the 1,000 largest companies in the world. So these are all major transnationals. And when you look at the WEF's actions, one of the repeating strategies that they use is they will create a crisis and solution. Okay, so they play that game. They'll advance the crisis, and then they'll advance the solution to the crisis. And invariably, their major corporate members have some financial stake in the proposed solution. So the game is, it appears quite clearly in my mind from having seen, and of course, the climate crisis agenda and the various proposed solutions, which never include nuclear energy. All of those proposed solutions are economically counterproductive, of windmills and solar panels and all those kinds of things. Anybody that did a real economic analysis, cost-benefit analysis for those sources of energy will see that they have no meaning at all. There is no intrinsic economic logic to support those. And so they've had to come up with these contrived logic arguments of CO2 release, when actually the world's largest contributor of CO2 from human activities is coal burning China, which has absolutely no restrictions on it. And they're just going hell-bent for leather, burning not just fossil fuels, but coal. And yet the World Bank is now prohibiting investments in emerging economies that would facilitate use of petroleum-based products for energy purposes, and only is willing to fund, quote, green alternatives for energy solutions in emerging or least developed countries, despite the fact that many of them have massive natural gas resources. And so they're locking them into debt and into the most expensive form of energy for the ostensible logic that they would otherwise contribute to climate change and global warming. I mean, there's just another puff piece out today about how this was the hottest, last year was the hottest year on record. But absolute silence about China and China's activities. And you know, the WEF member states, I say member states, I sorry, misspoke. Their corporate, you know, top corporate leadership members, these 1,000 largest companies, are the ones that are benefiting financial from these strategies. So that's how this game is played, is this crisis creation solution coupling. And the solutions are if examined rigorously, they make no sense at all, except through the lens of they're providing economic advantage to the 1,000 largest companies that make up the WEF. So it is clear corporatism, which in the book, you know, it used to be that when people would talk about fascism, they're always talking about the right. Mm-hmm. Fascism became a weaponized word, synonymous with Donald Trump and the right, or libertarianism, when in fact that's a complete falsehood. As defined by Benito Mussolini, fascism is synonymous with corporatism, which is synonymous with, here's that phrase that we hear again and again, public-private partnerships, right? And the thesis is that these large corporations are better suited to run the world than these very messy, decentralized democracies, if you want to call them democracies, these independent nation states. And my underlying hypothesis of what's really driving globalism, because it's all being promoted by these, you know, corporatist non-governmental organizations, with the WEF purporting to be setting itself up to be the new world governance organization, right? Mm-hmm. They're not shy about that. That if you look at this through the lens of these 1,000 largest transnational corporations, okay, they face a very fragmented market. They have to deal with the regulatory, political, and financial complexity associated with cultural and political diversity, and they don't like it very much. And they would prefer, and I think this is part of the underlying, I hypothesize this is part of the underlying agenda behind the open borders policy. They really want, they explicitly say they want to have a harmonized human race. They want one culture and one genetic profile, because that facilitates all kinds of things. Medicines, pharmaceuticals, politics, all kinds of things. I think that what's really driving a lot of this is that from a, one of these mega corporations' point of view, dealing with all this independent, diverse riffraff is what they call friction. It is an added cost of doing business that's unnecessary. It's an inefficiency in the system of having to deal with all of these independent nation states, cultures, ethnicities, genetic profiles, etc. And they would far rather have one harmonized world with one set of laws and one set of leadership, which, by the way, would be them setting the corporate policies. And then they wouldn't have to deal with all this complexity and diversity. They don't like diversity. Diversity is expensive. Diversity costs time and money to them. And they really don't care about what, for the likes of you and me, really, some of the key things that bring value to life, which is encountering people of different walks of life and different points of view, different races, different religions. The classical position is the USA is a melting pot, and that's a good thing. That cultural diversity benefits innovation and the interplay of ideas and cultures and business models and everything else, religions, is a good thing. It fosters innovation. But these folks don't care really about innovation. They care about profit. And that's going to be the real victim. Forgive my ranting here.
No,
If
please.
we allow the globalists to have their way with us, not only are we going to lose their freedoms, but in a fundamental sense, they're going to destroy human innovation. But they're all Malthusians. They believe that the world has limited resources, and they don't believe that human innovation can overcome the potential risks of those consumption of those limited resources. They believe in fixed resources, fixed world, and they don't. Innovation is also market disruption. Market disruption is a bad thing if you happen to be a monopolist, which is what literally all these entities are. They are all intrinsically monopolistic. Now, forgive the rain that's coming over the audio here, but we're having what's supposed to be 3 inches over the next 4 hours. So
Wow.
It's coming down pretty good, and the studio here is an old pig barn that has a metal roof. So
Oh, no sweat. I don't hear anything. So
good.
yeah, no, yeah, so I want to go back to farmers here because, so in Canada, the policy that came down to farmers was to reduce their nitrous output by 30%.
Right.
Right.
Same as happened in the Netherlands.
And
the argument that they would seize land and put farmers out of business because of this, quote, pollutant.
yeah, and so my grandparents owned a farm for decades. I spent every summer and winter on their farm here in Alberta. And I know the science that goes into farming. I myself am not a farmer, but there's a science to farming that extends thousands of years into the past.
Well, but since the 1960s, so this is the perversity of this whole situation, is that if, I saw a meme the other day that was perfect. It said, people that live here, and it had a picture of a smoggy cityscape, are telling people who live here, and it had a picture of round bales in an open field, that they're the ones that are damaging the environment,
It's crazy.
right?
It's
Um,
it's it's
but
crazy.
but think underneath this whole nitrogen argument, okay? What that's really, if you pick it apart, okay, what has happened since the rise of big ag? And Earl Butz in the USDA was an amazingly corrupt individual. Under Nixon, was responsible for, no, he wasn't even under Nixon. He was under, suddenly I'm blanking, Johnson, okay? Johnson administration, Earl Butz, get bigger, get out, right? It's an obligation of the United States, and by extension Canada, because of the wheat fields and everything, to feed the world. And so in order to do that efficiently, we have to use modern ag. Modern ag you can't buy, the other day I was looking at a chisel plow. Okay, I bought myself a chisel plow that's just behind my 60-horse tractor. Okay. And I'm looking at the price of real chisel plows, like you would drive behind a 160-horse, dually tractor. And we're talking $150,000.
Right.
Just for a great big gang chisel plow. And then you got all the other stuff you got to have, cultivators and everything else. So not to mention seed drills. Basically, get bigger, get out was super good for big ag, which is to say Wall Street, right? And the big investment houses, because your family probably got run out as mine did. My history on my mom's side was a fairly large sheep and wheat operation in Eastern Oregon. And then my aunt was a dairy farm. And I spent some summers there milking cows and dealing with shit and bucking alfalfa. So when I still buck alfalfa. But there was a period where we were making our own hay. So I'm not just a gentleman farmer. But what happened, if you think it through, getting back to nitrogen, they said, in order to get your productivity up, you're going to have to follow these big ag practices. You're going to have to use petroleum-based fertilizers. And a lot of the nitrogen fertilizer is coming from natural gas, by the way. That's the preferred technology. You basically sterilize the soil to about 12 inches. Okay, so you destroy all the biodiversity in your soil, which is where all your nitrogen is coming from naturally, right? Fertilizer, manure, instead of becoming fertilizer, becomes a problem. And our solution is oil-based, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, bag fertilizer, pelletized fertilizer, and sterilize the fields. And then plant the crop, and it's corn, wheat, and beans, and if it's animal husbandry, whereas it used to be on a smaller farm, everything was all mixed together. You had animal husbandry that was feeding the soil, and you were producing silage and other things, in addition to human food product that you would consume. I remember on the dairy farm, it was a whole lot of hamburger, and that hamburger was old dairy cows.
Right.
And
Yeah.
they slaughtered them there.
Yeah.
The tree out front, they'd hang them up and they'd work them down,
Right.
and they go in the freezer. And that's just the way things were. So now everything is siloed, quite literally, not, and figuratively. You produce on this, 160, you're producing corn, and on that 250, you're producing beans, and around it goes. You rotate your crops, and you sterilize the soil, and you feed them with nitrogen-based products using multi-million-dollar equipment operations that you are indebted to. You're constantly paying the bank. That's, you get your crop in, and you hopefully you've got a buyer,
Mhm.
and then you turn right around and you write the check to the bank. That's the modern life of the farmer. And then they come along and they say, "Dear Mr. Farmer, you're so naughty. You're using these big ag practices and generating all this excess nitrogen." And the farmer's like, "I'm sorry, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Um, you told me I had to do this, or you put me out of business, and now you're saying I'm going to put you out of business because you did it." The fraud here
Yeah.
um, is profound, and yet because they control corporate media, they can jam it down the throats of the consumer. And most consumers have never seen a bloody chicken.
Yeah.
Um, they don't know diddly about where all meat is something that comes shrink wrapped.
Yeah.
And they don't know anything about all of that, and they don't care, right? They just give me my chicken. And oh, so we did a piece the other day with Epic Times because we have chickens here.
Right.
We use something called um let's see what it's called, a true blue, which is kind of a flighty bird, which we're like, and it produces a blue egg. Whiting's true blue. The reason why we wanted it is because it's half wild, and the foxes won't get them as easy because
Right.
they fly. Okay, because we got a fox problem. But for us, the chickens are basically truly pasture raised. Here in the States, we have these terms that are approved by the USDA of cage free and free range. Okay. Free range means you got, cage free, they're still in the same damn chicken barn, but they have their beaks cut off. They've been de-beaked so they don't peck each other to death. And there's still thousands and thousands of chickens all jammed in shoulder to shoulder in a chicken barn. If you ever
Yeah.
seen a chicken barn, if you haven't, Mr. I live in Toronto, you ought to look it up.
Yeah.
If you think that you're getting a ethically raised egg or chicken, because it says free range, well, free range means, all that means is at a minimum, they have to have a hole in the side of the chicken barn that the damn chicken can stick his head out of.
Right.
Okay. It means nothing like what they've done with so many of these other terms. What you want is pasture raised, which is something the USDA completely ignores, which is the chickens are out there eating the bugs and
Yeah.
the dirt in the sunshine. And what you get out of that is these yolks that are bright yellow.
Yeah.
The egg white stands up. If you've never seen a fresh egg, which probably most of your audience has never seen a fresh egg, they've seen stuff that's been processed and cleaned and packaged and put on the shelf and blah, blah, blah. When you crack the egg open, the egg white all kind of goes evenly, spreads out. If you get a fresh egg, which most of you probably have never had, you crack it, and it's got a little bit of that thin white, but then it's got some really cohesive yolk that forms kind of a little mound.
Yeah.
And that's how you know you got a fresh egg. So this is what they've done, is they have driven our small farmers out of business already, forced them to become either debtors to large finance, or basically laborers working for big ag, which is to say large corporate interests. And they've been doing their best to make ends meet in a crazy messed up system where they are forced to use Monsanto's engineered, whatever the hell it is, or else they'll sue them if they're using seed corn that might happen to have been fertilized by their neighbor's Monsanto plot, right? Used to be you put aside a plot for seed corn,
Yeah.
right? And that's all gone. No, you got to buy it from Mr. Monsanto, which is to say Mr. Buyer. And use their specialty stuff that's specially attuned to using commercial fertilizers, and that whole ecosystem destroys the soil.
Yeah.
It bleeds all the micronutrients out of the topsoil. You end up with basically sand or, loamy rock or whatever it is your base is. And it's depleted of micronutrients. So then the consumer is getting a inferior product.
Mm-hmm.
It's just barely enabled to grow because it's this genetically tweaked stock fed this synthetic nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium stuff that it's almost like hydroponics.
Yeah.
And it's an inferior product. And so then we're all stunned why we have to get all this micronutrients from supplements. Well, it's because it's not coming in our food like it did for our grandfathers. I find the whole thing just obscene and so corrupt that the I'm sorry, I'm ranting again, but this pisses me off.
Yeah.
It really does. The targeting of the farmers, and it's hard, the targeting of the farmers because they've done what they've been told they had to do.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been forced into this bad system. And then they're criticized for doing what it is the system's forced them to do when, they could go back to old school where you have these mixed animal and crop operations like the Amish do or the Mennonites, where you're not only just rotating crops, but you're using this amazing product that's just full of microbes. And you want to talk about carbon, locks the carbon in and supplements the soil and enriches the microbial life and insect life, the worms and everything else. Go take a look at a big, 100+ acre plot that's farmed intensively on the, on the crop rotation, wheat, corn, beans. Take a little shovelful and tell me how many earthworms you see.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be Z, unless you're picking it off of the fringes where, the weeds have been growing.
Mm-hmm.
And then as if that isn't bad enough, then we've got the likes of Gates and the Chinese and God only knows who else coming in saying, we're going to buy all this up and put it fallow so that it can go back to nature and rejuvenate itself. Well, God damn it. It would have rejuvenated itself just fine if you had let farmers be farmers.
Yeah.
So there's my rant about this whole obscenity system. And the farmers, the suicide rate is through the roof. They are between a rock and a hard spot financially. They're being abused in every direction, and including by the bloody politicians. And that's what's going on in Germany is the politicians are saying, oh, we're going to have to raise taxes on farmers to support our urban agendas. And the farmers are finally saying, hell no, we can barely make it the way we are. And we thought you guys were appreciating the fact that we were feeding you. But in fact, no, they're not grateful. They assume food just comes, like the rain falling.
Mm-hmm.
They don't realize most of these people that are putting this kind of stuff together have never, lifted a hammer or scooped a shovel in their whole bloody life.
Yeah. That's right. No, what I see happening is kind of a combination of what the Soviets did with their collective and state farms and the Khmer Rouge in trying to move rural communities into the city.
Well put.
And
well put.
I think back to my granddad because my granddad was a real cowboy, probably much like yourself. And
Well,
I,
probably much more so. I'm kind of a derivative.
well, I imagine somebody trying to tell him what seeds he could use or what fertilizer he could use on his farm. He would have shot them. He would have shot
Yeah,
them. Like
yeah,
he wouldn't have like he was a no fuck around kind of guy. I
yeah.
mean, when I was out at the farm, every morning my job was to go out with my brother, bucket of feed. You lay it on the ground to get the chickens out of the coop because you can't take the eggs while they're in there. Unless you want to end up with thousands of stitches all over your hands and your arms. Yeah. Um, and shoveling shit. He would
Yeah,
hand me a shovel and say, "Hey, it's time for you to get out there and shovel some shit." And that was what it was. But in all the years that I spent out there, you get to see this unique ecosystem and how it functions and
yeah,
the science that they apply, which is centuries old science. I
yeah.
mean, this is stuff that guys in
It's
lab
it's
coats.
it's it's the learned wisdom of thousands of years of human existence in an agrarian model.
Yeah. And it's insanely narcissistic and arrogant to believe that a bunch of guys like Bill Gates know how to do it better.
I couldn't have said it better. And so, to your point, what we're dealing with in these self-appointed global leaders is that we have been selecting now for decades uh, as quote leaders, what's referred to as dark triangle personalities. And I'm referring to psychology. Okay, this is an accepted modern psychological term, even though mass formation psychosis was not accepted at the time. It's more so now. But dark triad is mainstream modern psychology. So these people are Machiavellian. They are on the psychopath sociopath axis. Um, uh, and I'm blanking on the third one. Uh, they so let's see, psychopath, sociopath, Machiavellian, narcissist. That's the third part of the dark triangle. Okay. And we select for these people in our leadership. I mean, if you want a poster child of a dark triad leader, Mr. Trudeau would suffice.
Yeah.
So would Gavin Newsom, who here in California is like a clone, pretty boy, and he can look straight in the camera, lie to you like a trooper, and not break a sweat. That's what, and I'm convinced that the WEF, because both of them, of course, are graduates of the World Economic Forum Young Leader Program, as are many of your quote leaders, political leaders, including what's her name, Chris Friedland.
Christopher Freeland, yeah, I think
Yeah.
she's on the board of trustees with the WEF as well. So
Yep. Okay. I'm convinced the WEF, which ACE is, it under my thesis, is this trade organization representing the interests of these transnational corporations. They select for dark triangle personalities. They select for people that have this ability to just flat out lie. They select for people who fit the profile of sociopath, psychopath. Now, just a minor little tangent in the literature and definitions in psychology. The main difference between psychopath and sociopath, these people that have no empathy for others, is that psychopaths are born and sociopaths are made. Psychopaths fundamentally lack something in the human brain that allows them to have empathy for others. And sociopaths learn it on the job by, bad parenting or whatever the hell. They're selected for it, but functionally they're interchangeable. And I'm convinced that the WEF selects for these people in their young leader program.
yeah, I mean, it's funny because you pointed to Gavin Newsom, and I was looking at him the other day, and I was like, he is the perfect example of an Americanized version of something Canadian. It's better, it's bigger, it's brighter, it's more devious, it's more sinister. It's like,
Better groomed.
yeah, better groomed, more well thought out. With Justin Trudeau,
Bigger smile.
that's right. He's the Canada. Trudeau is the dollar store version of Gavin Newsom. Trudeau is hopelessly transparent. I mean, the guy is insincere to a degree that your own human spirit, cringes at just having to listen
Yes.
to him speak, right? Because
Yes.
nothing he says is real. Nothing is coming from a real place. It's all
Yeah.
put there, and
It's all synthetic.
it's
Yes,
all synthetic. You
absolutely.
can see it in action, right?
Yeah.
And
If we were to create an AI to serve the WEF, and a rendered um what do they call it? NPC.
yeah, like a composite.
Yeah. He would be it,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
We don't actually need a living Gavin Newsom. A synthetic one would do just fine.
So why do you think the Democrats are going to put him in Biden's place, or do you think Biden still serves a purpose to them?
Or is it that Biden has enough hands on the levers of power, or Jill, that he'll be able to resist the efforts to shunt him aside after the primaries? It would be more of a current DC insider version.
Yeah.
So I consider him a friend and a colleague, Peter Navarro, who served in the Trump administration, and was, among other things, tasked with sourcing hydroxychloroquine for the whole nation, which he succeeded at, but then he got bushwhacked, and they ended up destroying all that HCQ. But that's another story. So Peter did an interview recently with the New American. So just a plug for New American. I think it's a great publication. It's from the John Birch Society, which has been vilified. But John Birch is, since the mid-century, since World War II, been a staunch anti-communist organization. They've been vilified for it, but suddenly their positions don't seem so radical in the face of the CCP, right?
Right.
So Peter gave an interview to Veronica Karolenko that was recently published that I kind of helped set up. Let me put this away. And in it, so Peter is pretty wired in with the Trump crowd. He's a friend of Bannon. And the thrust of the interview was that he is convinced that they will run Michelle Obama and Gavin Newsom as VP after the primaries. They'll get switched out in the convention. And that's going to be the Democrat dream team. And the way the Democratic Party has really cooked the books. I mean, we saw it with Bobby Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
So they are very good at excluding anybody that we can call them deep state, behind the curtain leaders, or they call them super delegates. They control what gets through. Mm-hmm. And so they have set up their party rules so that it's entirely feasible for them to swap him out and her in this way. And that's the scenario that many think would be best able to win for the Democratic Party. They have a problem with Kamala. One of their key constituencies in terms of the electoral college geography is South Carolina black women who came out in force to support Biden, probably played a key role in Biden winning if you believe that he won. Um, and certainly making the electoral count that happened. And so the Democratic Party can't afford to diss Black South Carolina women right now, is the way I hear the story from insiders. And that there are those who are arguing that the Democratic Party is coming apart at the seams at the moment, in a spectacular way, fighting over a lot of the current issues that they're grappling with, budget and everything else, and expansionism, imperialism, Ukraine, all that stuff. And so normally they would want to run Kamala to align themselves with this key constituency. Generally, Black men are increasingly coming over to the conservative side.
Yep.
So that's one of the big, one of the things driving the kind of breakup of the classic Democratic coalition. But if they're not going to run Kamala, and Kamala is an absolute loser. It was known when she was put in that she was not up to the task. And we've seen nothing but validation that she's not up to the task since then.
Yeah.
She was the one that was supposed to secure the borders, just to say it. So if not Kamala, what are they going to do to win over and maintain that base of Black South Carolina voters, women voters? And they've got to put a woman in the masthead. They've never succeeded in putting a woman in. And Michelle is perceived as a very formidable opponent by the Republican Party. And if it's Biden versus Trump, a lot of DC is kind of even the press is starting to come to terms with the fact that it would be Trump who would win. And that's already creating some strategic shifting and people positioning themselves so that they might have a chance to get back in a Trump administration. But if the Democrats manage to pull off something like a Obama Newsom ticket, then that electoral politics starts getting scrambled. And the big question in all of this, kind of the 800-pound gorilla unaddressed that a lot of the insiders discount, they think Bobby Kennedy isn't going to even pull a single electoral college vote. And he's just, I've heard terms like he's a vanity candidate. And I'm not disclosing who I'm hearing from, but I paradoxically find myself moving in very high-level conservative circles. Never asked for this. I never expected it, but it's just bizarrely happened.
Right.
I guess they like my message, but or my energy, but they perceive this potential pair as a significant risk, Bobby as a inconsequential vanity candidate, and yet polls are suggesting that Bobby can have a real impact. And so this is the wild card: is could Bobby? I don't think there are any serious political people who are seriously analyzing the odds, the outcomes, that political statisticians that count Bobby's candidacy as a serious contender for winning. But there's two wild cards that I think are out there. One is, could Bobby actually take enough electoral college votes to deny either party 270? Because if you can't get to 270, it throws it into the House. Okay. And the current Constitution indicates that in that event, each state would get one vote, one electoral vote. Not entirely clear who controls who that vote would be. Is it going to be the state legislature or what? Not a governor. So that's an important thing. But each state would control one electoral college vote, and then it would be a race for who gets the majority. So Bobby's the thinking is the best case scenario for Bobby is that he's a spoiler, and he forces the election into the House under these constitutional rules, which we've never seen before. So there's going to be all kinds of bickering.
Right.
It's just going to go on and on and on, and accusations of fairness and all that kind of. There's going to be all kinds of gaming going on. The other wild card scenario is something takes Trump out. Does Trump end up in jail and get Epstein? What is there, and the effort to get him off the ballot that passed in, I think it's Maine and Colorado, is going to be heard by the Supremes shortly. And I've looked at the 14th Amendment, which is the basis for this. This is this amendment, constitutional amendment that was put in place after the Second World War to basically keep old Confederates out of the U.S. government. And it is a hot mess. If you read that thing, and it's like reading the WHO's new pandemic health treaty and the international health regulations. You can't make heads or tails out of it.
Right.
And it's all written from the perspective of post Civil War, with no real thought about how it might be used or weaponized in the future. And a strong case is being made by many conservatives. The January 6th, which is increasingly being seen as a false flag manufactured operation, that January 6th was engineered to enable the application of the 14th Amendment. That all that talk about, remember, it was another one of these neurolinguistic programming. Insurrection. Okay, why would they use that term? Okay, because insurrection is the specific term used in the 14th Amendment.
Yeah.
Okay, so the thesis is that January 6th was engineered to support a narrative of Trump being an insurrectionist, which would allow them to remove him from ballots based on the Fourth Amendment, that this is a long game. And there's no question there has been an extremely aggressive, concerted effort that reflects really a sense of existential crisis, that if Trump gets in, it will be the death of the administrative state. That's where this, and all of the infrastructure associated with the administrative state, its links to corporate media, the role of FBI and CIA. There's an interesting article out a couple of weeks ago about how Obama basically re-engineered the CIA to support his agenda when he was in. So that's my snapshot of where all this is going. Since you raised the question, 2024 is looking like it's going to be a really turbulent ride. We're going to have Alaska air window blowouts on a routine basis. All right.
Yeah.
So strap in.
Yeah. No, I mean, even in Canada, like, we're gearing up for an election here. And of course, Trudeau is, despite all of the advice from liberal advisors, has decided to run for re-election. Problem is, this campaign doesn't really have any legs because nobody believes a single word he says, even liberals, anymore. I'm like you. I find myself in conservative circles, even though I, consider myself a centrist classical liberal. But our even our conservative see Canada is in a little bit of a different place because even our conservative candidate, he's still of the establishment. So,
Yep. So
he's
uniparty.
yeah,
Yeah.
and he's a populist. He speaks to the people. He's addressed things like central bank digital currencies and digital IDs and the World Economic Forum and all these things. But yeah, he's part of the uniparty. We don't have a Trump figure or a Bobby Kennedy. And in my opinion, I think Bobby Kennedy is the real dark horse in the US. And I think he's the best thing to happen to the United States in a really long time. I think that it's unfortunate that established media and just the establishment in general operates in the way that it does, because I feel like although Bobby Kennedy has his flaws politically, I feel like he might be the only one who's truly, interested in actually saving his country from certain doom, it seems, right?
Yeah.
And
So that's and the counter thesis is that Trump also he's pissed, he's mad as hell for good reason.
yeah,
And Bannon's argument for Trump, as of last year's CPAC, was Trump is a wartime president. He's battle hardened, and he knows what bad guys are, and he is not naive in the way that he was in the first term.
right.
We'll see. You know, he did a lot of things that, in retrospect, turned out to have been right. Uh, um, but got his ego, and his ability to build coalition. Uh, um, but then we have Javier Milei down in Argentina, who is just a battle axe
Yeah.
uh, to the administrative state there, and that seems to be the real deal. Of course, the narrative is that he's just another weffer, and you're probably there in Alberta. You're probably sensitive. A lot of people aren't aware. Argentina is sitting on an oil strike the size of the Permian Basin,
Right.
the dead cow oil field, and so they're all bitching because Milei aligned himself with the petrodollar. But what was his alternative?
Hmm.
To go with BRICS. Uh, um, you know, I so I know Bobby fairly well, and I don't want to bash him or talk him down, but I was asked to endorse him, and I did my best to graciously say no. I'm not formally endorsing anybody,
Hmm.
and if I'm called to serve in some future administration, I will serve my country to the best of my ability. But I'm not seeking political office in any way, and I think that here in the States we've got, as you point out, we have as much of a uniparty problem as you do.
Yeah.
The other wild card is that the European Parliament elections are coming up. I think it's in May, and that there's a number of alternative narrative candidates. Christine Anderson being the standard bearer, but we may see some fundamental shifts in the European Parliament, which would particularly coming from the Eastern Bloc.
Yep.
The former Soviet states they're kind of in the been there, done that with totalitarianism, and they don't want it again.
That's right. Yeah. No, that's exactly right. I mean, it's funny because I pointed to this the other day, but during the Freedom Convoy here in Canada, there's a number of videos, you can search them out, of people from Eastern Bloc countries who came to Canada to escape the Soviets, who are basically warning us, like, hey, this is what was happening. The same thing
Yeah,
was happening when I was a
same
child.
playbook.
Same exact. It never changes, right? And like,
Yeah.
that's the reason why I
Except
felt
for
that.
the thing that has changed is the power that is conferred by the internet.
Yeah. Well,
So,
and yeah, and it's funny. It's interesting you say that, because when I was talking to Brett Weinstein, that was a major part of our discussion, in that, they never anticipated Dr. Robert Malone to stand up and say, "Hey, what the fuck are you doing?"
yeah, bless his heart for that. That was his message in Romania at the Fourth International COVID Summit, which, by the way, uh, I'll just tell you a secret. The International COVID Summit is actually organized by a Canadian,
Oh,
uh,
nice.
but she remains very much behind the scenes. Uh, her and her cousin who lives in Rome. And there is going to be, so here's a shameless plug. We're doing ICS 5 concurrent with CPAC this February. And
Okay.
we've invited your Albertan Prime Minister. The concurrent session, we've got a 500 person room reserved at the Gaylord in DC. So pretty fancy digs. Uh, um, and that session all day is going to be focused more on geopolitics, WEF, UN, the International Health Treaty, and kind of the geopolitics of what we've seen with COVID and censorship, rather than our history in the past has been to be more focused on science. And then the following Monday, there'll be testimony in the Senate sponsored by Ron Johnson in the U.S. Senate that'll be
Okay.
more scientific.
Mhm.
And then in the interim, we'll have another day. We're still discussing about whether some of it will be open to press or it will be our usual kind of behind the scenes, no press allowed, where we all get to talk to each other. But we're so far the list of international politicians that are saying yes is deep and amazing.
Mm.
And I think that could be a big event. So, of course, we would welcome attendees from Canada, particularly from Alberta, uh, um, uh, as you're the kind of the epicenter of the Canadian resistance.
We are.
And we're hoping that your PM might attend directly or send a representative. We've got multiple members of the European Parliament coming, hopes for the likes of Andrew Bridgen, et cetera, and Nigel Farage, and others representing the UK. So I think it's February 24 to 27.
That
So
sounds
put
amazing.
we haven't yet posted the official website, uh, but that's looking like it's gonna come mature. And then people that will be enrolled, the actual fee will be $95, and that will give you entry into the full CPAC. So you can attend both the breakout session in that one day and then the other CPAC days. And we are absolutely setting it up so that alternative media can buy access to Media Row. Sponsors can get sponsor booths, et cetera. So keep that on your calendar.
That sounds amazing. And I know you have to run. You got some work to do on the farm. I just want to ask you one really quick question before you go, because you brought up Romania. Um, uh, Denis Rancourt gave
Absolutely knocked it out of the park.
so can I ask you if you've read that study, what you think of that estimated 17 million figure? Do you think that's an accurate estimation?
I think it's some of the best that anyone has been able to do. And I'm very impressed by Dennis and his team. This is what they do for a living. And I kind of introduced Ed Dowd to the world a bit. I met him on Maui and worked with him early on in a lot of this stuff. But then I had to kind of clock out because it was just, he was doing his insurance database stuff. And I couldn't keep up with that and everything else I had to keep up. But Ed and his team have a different point of view. They're analysts, investment analysts, and that's more forward-looking, risk analysis, et cetera. Dennis is and his team are classic academics. He got run out of academia because in prior issues before this, he was coming to controversial conclusions. But I have no doubt of his professionalism and rigor, and was very impressed by the examples he gave historically of other all-cause mortality events historically. I think he's the real deal. He's probably as close as we can get right now with the highly biased data sets that are available, that are quite edited. Just another paper came out that I published on Substack, citing about the New Zealand government manipulating the renal morbidity. So this is kidney impacts of the jab, and kind of just arbitrarily cutting them in half. We've had the governments that are complicit in this face a real problem, including your government, and especially the United States government. I mean, the data are in now, and the U.S. government absolutely colluded with the CCP and the People's Liberation Army to engineer this virus, and U.S. funded it, and that's the truth. And then the U.S. government played a key role in jamming this through the regulatory process, and then propagating it across the world. These are not safe products, and they absolutely aren't effective. They're licensed. I ran this around the other day. The licensure for these modified mRNA products is for preventing COVID. That is their licensed indication. Okay. They absolutely do not prevent COVID.
Yeah.
They do not prevent infection. They don't prevent replication. They don't prevent spread. They don't prevent disease, and they don't prevent death. Those are all true statements. You can take them to the bank. Any fact checker can look at that, and they're going to have a hard time wiggling around that statement I just made. And yet that's what they're licensed for. And then we have the new stuff with the DNA contamination and all that they're just, substituting lies because they don't have the data to support their position. But that's a whole nother half-hour discussion.
Yeah, I read your piece on Paul Offit, and
oh yeah,
his let's, to put it nicely, his misunderstanding of the science.
We have a new category of denialism, DNA transfection deniers, and two of them happen to be Paul Offit and the director of CBER, Peter Marks, who, by the way, together with Bob Cadillac, is the one that engineered Operation Warp Speed. Okay, so a little conflict of interest there. That's his baby. He wants to win. But they are in flat out denial. And I invite you to call up the University of British Columbia and let's see, what's his name? I'm suddenly blanking and I'm embarrassed by it. Peter Cullis. Pietercullis. Look him up. UBC. Good luck getting him to take a phone call. He won't take mine anymore. He used to. For some reason, I'm perplexed.
I know, right?
Yeah, but ask Peter Cullis, or you can just look him up on PubMed or whatever, and see whether his transfection formulations work for DNA. And the answer is yes. Okay, I guarantee. Okay, right. So all this, it doesn't ever get into the cell. The DNA won't get into the nucleus. It's all a fake because I say so. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And it took me about 3.2 nanoseconds on the internet to pull up PubMed and do a keyword search on DNA transfection and pull up about 30,000 references. Okay.
Right.
This absolutely happens. So it's the whole thing is just veering into bizarro land, as people say, clown world.
It really is. And, I guess just to close, Anthony Fauci is currently in a closed door session giving a statement.
And we have today's Substack, I think Jill's working on it right now, is going to be the first press release from that committee. And one of the things that they've revealed is that Tony said that he signed off personally on every single grant and contract coming out of the NIAID. So he signed off on those grants, but he did not review them. And that, this is, I did not have sex with that woman.
Yeah.
Furthermore, NIH has no mechanism for verifying compliance with foreign grant awardees.
Right.
So basically, if you're the Wuhan Institute of Virology, you can say that I'm going to do this research using the latest reverse pressure wound suit stuff, and then go pay people to go do it at the bench, and no one's going to be the wiser.
Right.
And you could pocket the difference.
Right. Yeah, so do you think Anthony Fauci, Peter Daszak, any of these, I'm sorry for not having a better phrase, but any of these fucking scumbags, do you think any of them do a day in prison or suffer any repercussions?
So here's the working thesis from the insiders that I chitter chatter with. And some of them are extremely knowledgeable. The administrative state cannot be held guilty for this. Okay, this is a political reality. Okay, they never get held accountable for any of the stuff they do. The torture, it just doesn't happen. But this is so big that somebody is going to have to take a fall. Somebody's going to get thrown under the bus. Who's that somebody? That is the big buzz right now. And as I said, there's a whole lot of scrambling and positioning right now from people like Bob Kadlec with his interview with Sherry Markson at Sky News in Australia, to try to, cover their backside and get back in good graces after having been disgraced by their activities. And this is akin to Peter Navarro's hypothesis about where the Democratic Party is going to go. So it's in the realm of, we call it hypothesis.
Right.
Okay. The hypothesis is that Daszak and Fauci are going to be the sacrificial lambs. Somebody is going to have to go down for this. Daszak is the closest thing to a puppet master we have. More so than Klaus Schwab. Daszak is internationally connected with everybody. He's right at the center of all this with Bill Gates and everything else. Okay, so Daszak is on the short list for a bus ride. Or they say in Yellowstone, a ride to the train station.
That's right.
Right. Fauci, also, the problem being Fauci is an insider, deep stater. And the unknown is whether or not Moderna and Pfizer are going to have to take a hit on this. Under the thesis that the US government was hoodwinked by these bad actors who were not open and transparent about what they were doing. We wouldn't have known. This is consistent with Fauci's positioning. Yeah, I signed off on it, but I didn't actually look at it. Right? And right. No, my people don't have any mechanism. Oh, you should give me more money so that we can set up another institute to do the work that we should have been doing instead of all the FTEs that we were hiring to interface with the press, for instance. He's had like the size of his FTE, full-time employee cadre for managing external press relations is like 45. He had like 45 full-time employees managing social media and corporate media. That's just from NIAID. That's not all of NIH. That's just Tony Fauci.
Right.
Okay, that's bigger than most newsrooms.
Yeah.
Okay. They had plenty of money. They just decided to spend it in ways that advance their own careers and their own agendas,
Right.
instead of on stuff like, hey, figuring out whether the people that we're giving money to are actually doing what they said they were going to do.
Right.
It seems reasonable to me.
Yeah.
But that's that crystal ball is somebody's going to take the fall. The administrative state can't.
Right.
Just politically and
Right.
financially. And the question is, as the burden of evidence is accumulating, who's going to be the sticky?
Yeah. Well, I hope so. I hope it's more than a few people. You know, I mean, just to
Oh, it won't
just
be. No, there will be a very small number of sacrificial lambs.
yeah, just basically another
Okay.
Bernie Madoff is essentially what we're going to be looking at here, right? Well, all the
If we're lucky.
yeah, I know. Well, you know, I guess approving grants and not reviewing them and not knowing where the money's going or what it's going toward, I guess that's justified in some sense in our crazy upside down world that we live in.
So another one of the loose cannons that I'm hearing is that Tony actually was principal investigator on a number of his own grants. So he's signing off on the money to go to his own people and his own projects, for which he gets on the patents, for which he gets the patent revenue, right? We're now talking about big money. We're talking about billions
Right.
over multiple years, because as Brett laid out in that lovely discussion he had with Tucker, the platform technology, which Mr. Cullis and his colleagues will benefit greatly from, and rumored is that the Trudeau Foundation or family also, unconfirmed, that's a multi-trillion-dollar market.
Right. Yeah.
And that will not manifest if the truth comes out about how toxic this stuff is.
Mm.
So pharma is going to fight tooth and nail to protect its estate, its property, its multi-trillion-dollar cash cow over the next 20 years.
Wow.
And that's the real fight.
Yeah.
We get distracted by the stuff over here.
Yeah. No, that's it. That's it. That really is it. Is that we're, you know, it's like these political cudgels and talking points are thrown at us just so that we don't see what's happening over there. Right. And, well, Dr. Malone, I know you got to get outside in the rain and, you know, proverbially shovel some
Shovel
shit.
shit.
Yeah, there we go.
Or at
So
least feed the chickens.
well, hang around for a second after we're done recording. We'll say goodbye privately. But in the meantime, can you tell everybody where they can find you on Substack?
Well, this is interesting because yesterday, when I was online with the testimonial group, they tried to find my Substack using, I forget, it was a Google browser. And it got flagged as, you know, they typed in the address I gave them, and it got flagged as dangerous content. Other people, and so Jill posted this on X, and then a bunch of Canadians wrote back, no, I can see it. So God bless you if you can find rwmalonemd.substack.com. Of course, there's also our book, and on X, Gab, Getter, and True Social, it's at rwmalonemd, if you're allowed to see any of those. And then there's the Malone Institute. So that's maloneinstitute.org, one word, and then .org. And there we have a lot of the more lengthy documentation about things, including the most comprehensive spreadsheet list of graduates of the WEF Young Leaders Program. So you can look it up, and you can, if you can use Excel, just click the tab and sort by country or industry or last name or whatever it is you want. And you can smoke out who there in Alberta is a product. I argue that WEF Young Leader graduates are foreign nationals.
Mm.
They
Yeah.
they are serving the interests of an organization that asserts that it is the global government. Okay, that means they're not working for Canada. They're working for a hostile globalist power. They should give up their citizenship, as far as I'm concerned, or in the United States, they should have to register as foreign lobbyists if they're active in politics.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you're interested in that kind of stuff, you can do a deep dive in the Malone Institute and just follow the links to the WEF Excel spreadsheet, and happy hunting.
Man, you just dug up a whole other mound of dirt, sir. I got to have you back sometime soon to get to dig into that one, because that was that. Yeah. Okay. Well, Dr. Malone, thank you again for your time and your wisdom, sir. I really appreciate the conversation, man. It was great.
Been a fun. Stay safe.
Yeah.
Next
Thank
year is
you.
going to be a rough ride.
Yeah, it is for sure. You might find me out on your farm. I might be looking for work as a farmhand in the near future. So.
Well, that works for us. We are looking for good labor.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.